Tito Atira Reneltta Arluk. So hello, my name is Reneltta Arluk, and I'm the Director of Indigenous Arts here at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity here in Treaty 7 territory, home of the Stoney Nakoda, the Sitchin of the Dene, Blackfoot Confederacy, Métis Region 3 with the Gathering Nations of Cree and Tanaha. I'm originally from the Northwest Territories. My mother is Dene, Susthene, and Cree from Wood Buffalo and Treaty 8 territory. My father's Inuvialuit Gwich'in from the Inuvik region. And where I'm from, we mostly live around Canadian Shield, so that old pink granite and deep lakes and rivers. And so to be in the mountains here has been such a learning. So I'm really grateful to be able to be surrounded by the mountains. And I always say, having a mountain in front of you, you have no option but to face yourself and look at yourself, which I think is quite a powerful teaching that I've learned while here in Treaty 7 territory. I just want to say how incredibly grateful I am for Christi Belcourt and the sharings that she offered yesterday. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So let's just welcome Christi Belcourt.
Well, hello, everybody. Back again. This is... I'm really looking forward to this conversation today with you.
Yeah, me too. I was listening when you were doing the your family introductions. A lot of the names that you were naming are a lot of the names are in my home community of Fort Smith, so just above the Alberta border. And so the Toronjos, the one that got me was Larocque. So I haven't heard Larocque. Other than that was my grandfather's last name. He wasn't my real grandfather. That was my grandmother's partner up until he passed away at 96 a number of years ago. But that's who raised me on the land, was Archie Larocque.
Yeah, that's my great grandmother's name, my dad's grandma.
Yeah, and so his history was, I mean, he was born in Fort Fitz, and his mother was a Flett, but his grandfather, he said, was part of the Louis Riel Rebellion way back in the day, and that when Louis Riel's when they disbanded because of the government, his grandfather ended up in Fort Vermilion, and so then that's how I think maybe they probably got up north.
Yeah, that's probably how. I mean, a lot of people moved around after 1885, after 1870, really, in the Red River, when the first resistance was taken up by us and fought. Not the first of all resistances, but the first in our history that was significant, in the sense that that was when the first Métis provisional government was formed. It was before Canada had illegally claimed the land through the illegal sale of land through Rupert's Land. Can you imagine that? Like, just think about that for a minute. This idea that a company, would own, Hudson's Bay Company would just arbitrarily own a landmass the size of what, like just arbitrarily own all that land, just granted from some, I don't even know how they got granted that ownership. And then all of a sudden they decide that they're going to sell all of this land to Canada. It just, it baffles the mind to think that somehow that we are not all sitting on, stolen land in that sense, like it just how the whole of Canada is, the foundation of Canada is based on theft of land. And it's the biggest land, not just Canada, but wherever the British Empire went, wherever the Europeans went and colonized, it's the biggest land theft in the history of the world, I think. It just baffles the mind, the history, really.
Yay. And that teachings, like to learn all that and kind of incorporate that, and like that, my grandfather used to talk about how he was known as the man who knew the barren lands better than anyone, knew the barren lands like the back of his hand, Métis trappers whole life. And I learned not when I got older, I realized the value of Métis knowledge, how Métis knowledge is quite different than First Nations and Inuit knowledge, and that Métis knew land so well and knew the history of it so well, and that we learned through that lens, I think, is quite powerful. And it really isn't all of your work. I mean, it kind of blew me away, and I'm so grateful for yesterday. But I wrote down the anthropomorphize. It's like you do the opposite of anthropomorphize. It's, how we take human emotions and put them into animals so that we can create a sense of awareness of land and place. But you actually do the opposite. You bring plants and animals into human so that we are able to see ourselves in the land and the environment. And that really kind of struck quite hard yesterday.
That's interesting. I don't think I ever consciously sort of thought of it that way.
Yeah, just that when you think about the pink frogs, like I was looking at the pink frogs yesterday, and the teachings of, and what really struck was the teachings of the sturgeon and the frog and those stories, and then bringing that into your work. It doesn't, it allows us to see ourselves in that world. Whereas I find sometimes when we think about climate change, we are always trying to bring humans into their world. And I don't know if that's, that's the as in depth or as cohesive as it is to kind of bring us into that world and see it through their eyes, or not their eyes. But
I think one of the things I've observed in my 55 years of life on this planet is that we human beings are very self-centered. We like to see ourselves at the center of everything. We think we are the center of everything, and we aren't. But I think it's like we're very species centric, I suppose, if that's even a word. But that's the way I sort of see how we behave when it comes to even thinking about issues of quote unquote rights. We put the idea of our rights in front of other species' rights. So even though as Indigenous people, we might have a understanding and a belief system that's strong and healthy and beautiful and vibrant in the idea of how we are connected to the land, there are occasions when we have put our sense of this fighting for rights above the rights of other species to their territories. So like the little people or the spirits of the land, that's some of those places, as we know, are sacred sites. Those places are their territories. They're not ours, and we know that. We're respectful when we go to those places. We provide offerings when we go to those places. Lots of people will be quiet, or they'll know how to behave in a certain way when they go to these places that they've been. And this knowledge is something that's been handed down for thousands of years, from generation to generation. So we understand the land. We know the land. There's still people who do know the land like the back of their hands, thank goodness. And there's people who do carry that knowledge and those stories. But unfortunately, sometimes in our politics, we can get lost, I guess is the best way to say it. And we tend to sometimes lose sight of those things, or maybe some of our politicians weren't taught those things. And so they end up saying that, we have a right, for example, to the moose, let's say, just for example. So a lot of times there'll be fights over moose. So they'll be like, we have the right to the moose. And then other people will say, no, we have the right to the moose. And then somebody will say, well, I have tags for the moose. And then it becomes a human to human fight for the moose. And even at the same time, we're watching the populations dwindle. We're seeing clear cuts. We're seeing that the moose's territory is not being protected. And I was thinking about the idea of rivers being given the rights to personhood, which in New Zealand that's happened. So it has happened in the world where rivers and bodies of water have been given legal rights, I guess, as a person. And I was thinking, if corporations can be given personhood status, then why can't rivers and lakes be given personhood status, considering that they've, provide so much life and really sustain life on Earth. So sometimes I think it's important to put other species and understand that other things, spirit species, other things have a right to exist as much as we do. And that we can all coexist in a way that is sustainable.
Amazing. Yeah, I was I think I listened to a news story a couple weeks ago where it was, I think, in Arizona, but that water is connected to the peoples in that area. And some of the concerns was, well, what if we don't have access to that water because they do? And it's just such a backwards way of thinking, because, the water exists and brings life because of sustainability, not because of ownership. So yeah, it's powerful to think about that way. And yeah, when I was looking at I was amazing to hear you talk about the beadwork patterns that you have, and how many aunties and moms and friends like have those cutout thick like the back of the drawing pad, the back of that with all the cutout and pen, and then they cut it out and then they keep it in a folder. So it's pretty amazing to see yours. I was like, oh my God, there's those pattern cutouts. And just honoring and recognizing where those patterns come from. I mean, why do you think that that's a really important thing to do, to acknowledge where those patterns come from?
Well, it's like I was saying yesterday, it has to do with traditional copyright protocol. So we always had that built in, as far as I have been taught, that we've always had that built into our understanding of how to be polite human beings with one another is, we don't take other people's patterns without asking. There are times when I think people, copied patterns in the sense of, there's been like, when you look at the octopus bag, for example, that's those beaded bags with the 8 fringes that hang down, or not fringes, but sort of like tabs that hang down. And that pattern, I don't even know where the original octopus bag pattern came from, but Métis people made that bag a lot. There's a lot you can see it in museum collections, and we still do. We still make that bag, but it was also in, you see it in Cris beadwork, you see it in Cris, I guess not just beadwork, but I guess material culture. You see it in Cris material culture, you see it in Tlingit material culture, you see it in, like, it's that pattern passed around, for this octopus bag. The patterns pass around sometimes from community to community, and you don't really know. So there's a kind of a really neat sort of overlap or blending sometimes. Like, that's why in museum collections you can see beadwork that, clearly it looks like it's either Métis or Métis Cris, or maybe Métis Anishinaabe or Anishinaabe or Cris. Like, there's this sort of like this kind of like same thing happening, but then at the same time you can pinpoint where beadwork comes from, which I find really fascinating. Yeah. Like the community of Eybler Quartet has its own mojo going on when it comes to beadwork patterns. And so you can, like, when you see a pair of moccasins or a jacket or something from there, it comes from there, it comes from that community. So I think that there's kind of a really neat identity connection that can happen with beadwork, not just historical beadwork, but like contemporary beadwork. Even we're watching an explosion right now, like of Indigenous beadwork artists and other, quill artists and artists that are using all sorts of materials that are just in abundance to us right now, whereas before they would have been rare or sometimes scarce. The colors have exploded. I think that there's like a whole a whole study that could be done just on earrings alone right now. There's like, it's all like, look at your earrings, look at my earrings. Like, there's a whole thing happening. There's a movement of earring artists happening right now. It's exciting to watch, on social media.
Yeah, I bring it up because my mother's a traditional bead worker, and she learned in Fort Good Hope, Northwest Territories, with Luciane Yakalai and Judy Lafferty, and their mother Mary, and similar to what you're sharing for beadwork down south. Up north, I could tell you each community. I could tell you where that beadwork came from, and I can almost tell you who sewed it. Earrings now is a bit of a different ride. I could maybe tell you who made it, but I think what's important to talk about is that artistic inspiration of designs, because we are seeing where someone will come up with a great pattern and then we'll see it in two different places somewhere else. And my mom was like, I don't mind sharing my stuff on Instagram, and I don't care if people copy me. I'm just happy to have it out there. But I go, but also it's important to recognize that people's creativity is their creativity, and that, being inspired by, and so acknowledging where that came from. Like when you look at those patterns, I look at my mom's, it'll say like Judy on there or Luciane on there, so that she goes, oh, I got this style from this person. And so there is a protocol that goes with it, and it is exploding. I cannot tell you the thousands of dollars that I have in earrings right now. It's ridiculous.
I had a social media thing not too long ago where I just sponsored the deadliest earring contest, and I got people to submit their collection of earrings and also like deadliest quill work, deadliest, like all these things. So it was just for fun, and it put a little bit of money into some people's pockets, and then other people pitched into it. And so, I think the winners got like a couple $100 each or something. It was good. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, that the patterns are identifiable, and that's our copyright. And I think that there's a confusion between like when I've had people like message me and they'll show me a replica of my painting. So they'll like they'll replicate it like exactly or close to, and then they'll say, look at the work I did inspired by your painting. And so there's like, no, that's a copy, that's not inspired by. And I think it's important to like understand that we do have these traditional kind of copyrights within our communities. We understand them, we know them, and we respect them and follow them. And among beadworkers and sewers, it seems to be like just people understand it really well. Whereas with painting and other things, it's a little bit not so understood. Yeah.
Yeah, those conversations have yet to kind of happen. And do you think it's because it kind of goes outside of that Indigenous kind of ways of knowing, or is that, or is it because the communities are a little bit smaller so that they're able to kind of stay a bit more connected?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
All good. We didn't get to see a lot of your early work yesterday, but you did mention that it was like you do big work, and that you started small and then just kind of went really, really big. And that I noticed, you talked about like the 300,000 dots in your pieces. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of grew into doing dots?
Sure. I started with a pair of mucklucks that were given to me by I say my aunt because that's what I called her, but it was my ex-husband's aunt. So my daughter's great auntie. And those mucklucks were on my wall for like a good long time. I just kind of hung them up because they were too big. And I just admired them. I've always had beadwork around me growing up, so I've always like it's part of the house kind of thing, and it's artwork to me all the time, even though I'll wear it. And I just was staring at them one day and I thought, oh, I should do a painting, based on this beadwork. And so I tried to do it, and it was really bad. It was a bad painting. And then so I started kind of like realizing like, oh, I don't really understand the way plants are constructed. and I don't understand the way beadwork is done. So I better, sort of start paying attention. And then that kind of got me on this. I got really obsessed, like obsessed. And I started to just every single plant that I would see, I would crouch down, I would look at it, I would try and see how it grew. I would watch to see where does the branch hook up to the stem, what shape is the leaf, what color is it, and I would take photos as close up as I could in macro, and then I'd go back to my computer and like blow them up and like really take a good look, and then I'd start to distill these patterns out of them and make patterns on the back of cereal boxes and birch bark and all sorts of things. And then as I got into that, and then I was also looking at beadwork and historical beadwork and started really understanding the patterns and how do people put things together. And so that just all kind of melded. At first, I was making sort of paintings like the one behind me. So it was like with lines, and then I would do like the very first ones I did were lines and solid colors and just a few dots to sort of kind of like suggest beadwork. And then it got to like the one behind me, which is like more dots on the solid colors, until I finally just got rid of the solid colors and the lines altogether and just started doing complete dots. And when I did that, it was like something had opened up, like a door had opened up. And I was like, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing here. This is better. I like this. This is good. I still do the one behind me sometimes, but then I just started getting really into this idea of doing them on black, because black is like the old trade wool. That's why I'm doing it on black, is because it's emulating that old beadwork. And from what Maria told me, Maria Campbell, who I mentioned yesterday, what she told me was, she said that women used to, like our women, Métis women, used to really love that old dark trade wool because first of all, it was so soft, and it was, at the time, it wasn't rough. It was very soft and very beautiful and easy to work with, and very easy to sew on. And then the colors of the beads were just popping right off of it, so that's why my paintings are black.
It's very distinctly Métis as well. Like again, up north, we sew on hide, we sew on moose hide and caribou hide. And so when I see black velvet, or I see your black background, like your art, it does reflect a Métis feel to it, because that it is something that kind of goes together.
Yeah, we do it on hide too. Definitely, we're hide tanner people. I was just given it was like the best gift. My dad's cousin. So my great grandmother had hide scrapers and this old shawl. I think it's great. Anyway, and my dad's cousin, so it would have been my dad's auntie. She had the hide scrapers that were passed down to her, and then when she passed away, she gave it to her daughter, and then her daughter contacted me, that's my dad's cousin, and said, what should I do with these? And I was like, I am hide scraping now. This is like, I'm starting to learn, and this would be like the biggest thing that I could ever have. So she sent them to me, and I have these hide scrapers that are I don't even know how old they are, but I have one flesher and two fleshers and one scraper, and it's like just really, I had a little cry when I got them, just a little, because it's just so touching to receive something. It's the only thing I have that is of my great grandmother's, and to know that she was sitting there doing everything like everybody else was doing, which was tanning hides and sewing moccasins and sewing things. And but the dots of color don't pop on a deep, rich brown the way that they pop on black. So that's one of the reasons why I keep painting on black too.
Oh, I know you had Mila at your camp, Nakeko, and she's such an amazing moose hide tanner.
She is like a warrior woman. I love her so much. She is incredible. Like, she's just, you speak to her and she's so soft and so lovely, and you know that she can just kick ass. And, she knows so much, like her knowledge is rich and deep, and she doesn't hoard it. She shares it when she comes to teach in communities, which is she's come down to Nimkiajabakong a couple times. And when she teaches everything, and she doesn't hold back. She gives you everything so that you can be the best hide tanner that you can be. I really love her.
Yeah, in her tools, I'm sure she shared with you, her tools were given to her. So it's very similar, not great, but definitely it had skipped a generation. And because those tools came to her, that's how she began. Yeah, there's power in those tools.
It sure is. Makes you really appreciate the moose so much too, so much more when you're scraping the hide. So like when she first came up, it just happened that as she was being driven from the airport, which is like a good 3 hours away from Nimkiajabakong, and there was a moose that was hit on the side of the road. So the guys went over to go get it, and it was sad because it was a pregnant moose. So we took back, there was other people there too that wanted some too. So we took back the hide, the head, and parts of the moose. And out of that moose, we made scrapers, we made sinew, we had lots to eat, and we had a feast, and we made offerings. We had the brain to tan the hide. We of course we tanned the hide, and that was the first hide we did there at the camp. And it was just like such a moving thing to, I've had lots of moose meat in my life, and I really respect and appreciate the moose, but I don't think it's like you don't think that you could love any deeper than you do, and then you find a new level of love. That's what happened. I found a new level of love for the moose that I didn't think that I had in me, but it was there.
Wow. And you see the moose, and when you do your banners for Water is Life and land defending, you have the moose there with a little heart, just so cute.
Yeah.
With the art that you create with the Onaman Collective and with Isaac Murdoch, it's been so impactful for land defenders and water defenders. And I just was kind of curious on how that came to be. Like, why did that art movement become part of that, or why did you feel inspired to create that as part of an art movement or advocacy?
Well, I don't think when it started, I wouldn't have said that it was an art movement in the sense that you don't think of it like that. You just take action, right? Yeah. So, and as artists, that's what we know how to do best. So we just take action in the way that we know how to do it. So part of that is you create art because you're inspired in the moment to do it, and then you share it and other people pick it up. And one of the things that we did when we started doing these things, because we're thinking about this stuff all the time, and we're environmentalists, and we believe in our people, and we believe in the strength and knowledge of our people to understand how best to take care of our lands and waters. So of course, we stand on the side of water protectors and land defenders and land protectors, because they're really putting their bodies on the line for the rest of the world. And, so we just didn't really do much thinking about it. We just create these images, and then we're like, let's do a bunch of screen them up into banners and then send them out there for free, because there's people taking actions in solidarity all across the country or whatever. And so we just ended up doing that over and over to the tune of about 10,000 banners, at least, all over. We went all over North America and to different communities. We did some in Colorado with a community there to support their trying to get their anti-fracking stuff happening. Like the fracking wells in Colorado are unbelievable. Like just they're everywhere, and they're just thousands of them and right next to schools. And, it's just, it's really sad to see what human beings are doing to the planet and to the waters. And so when we started doing those banners, we just, that's what we did. And then people wanted more of them. And so we put them up online on our website and as downloadable PDFs that people could download and then burn onto screens and then do their own art builds. And we learned this from David Solnit. I should mention him from 350.org in San Francisco, Oakland. We met him in Winnipeg with oh shit, my brain is just fried. Sorry, I just forgot. But anyway, we met him and we did an art build there, and then we went to Standing Rock, and we ended up bumping into him there, and he was doing an art build there. So we sort of got on this thing with banners through David, and then he came up to Toronto one time and helped us with one. And David is really an incredible art activist when it comes to land protection and labor rights and things like that. So I'll just do a shout out for him.
Yeah, art activist, not art movement. Yeah, definitely. That's it's not about the art, it's about the action of change. That's really what it's incredible that I mean, how does one, we advocate in the way that we know, right? Like, and so, through art, through voice, through singing, I mean, we're artists, and we have the gift of seeing the importance of voice and place and our world in it. And I'm curious, like, how did that come from your life, your growing up, to becoming a visual artist? And then was the activism always there and then the art came, or was the art there and then the activism? How did you become you, Christi?
That's funny. I don't know. I mean, you just do a lot of things in your life if you're blessed to live old enough, and you just get to do everything. I don't know. I think first of all, it starts with understanding, like I was saying yesterday, how much we have to live in gratitude for the way that the earth supports us as a species. We have to be in gratitude and awe of the beauty of this world. And then you naturally want to step in and protect it. We have to. And we have to do so. We have to say something. I was thinking, my mom was telling me the other day, my mom, Judith, she was saying, it's the studies. She was talking about some study that was done on how do what is the makeup or the breakdown of human kind of like left-leaning, right-leaning, and how can things like that we think are so horrible happen, like with what humans are doing, like to each other and whatnot in wars and stuff like that. Why does that happen? And she was saying that she was reading that 20% of people are left-leaning to the point where they will never be moved from the left. 20% are so right-leaning that they will never be moved from the right, I mean. But there are 60% who sit in the middle that will sway one way or the other, whichever way the wind blows, and it's the 60% that are, when they don't speak up, when they don't say anything, when they don't do anything, then the people who are hell-bent on destroying the earth are getting away with it because the 20% are not enough to tip the scale. I was also watching this documentary once where there was these deers, they were studying these deer, and the deer were in their, I don't know, they were going to go to their winter spot, which was over by some water. And these filmmakers were filming them and saying, okay, well, let's watch the moment because where their spot was right in the middle of 3 possible watering spots where they normally went. So they want to know, how did the deer make the decision to travel to which one? And so what they did was they filmed them, and they thought that it was going to be the male, the biggest, strongest male, that was going to be the one that made the decision. And what they found was at one point, all of the deer lifted their heads, and they all faced different directions. And then at one point, over 50% of them faced one direction, and the rest of them turned and walked towards that spot. And I thought, that's really beautiful, first of all. And second of all, there is a way of collective decision making that works. We are not in tune as we could be. Being spiritual beings having a human experience, we are not in tune with the earth. There's lots of stories where people, lots and lots of historical records and stories passed down within our nations that talk about people that speak to animals, people that understood animals, people that could communicate with plants. People still can, some, but it's not like maybe it was before. And spiritual powers that people would get from fasting, or from dreams, or from birth, or from near-death experiences, or whatever. And this connection that we have to the earth, we can all have, and we'd had systems within all of our indigenous nations, all indigenous nations across the planet. We had systems, or have systems, that understand how to live in balance with the earth, that still provide for everybody. And I think that there is a way to get there. It's kind of a hard path, though, when the solidification of corporation into personhood status happened, and since free trade and all of those, the globalization of and commodification of goods, and all these things have sort of put it makes the path there harder. But if we can get to that over 50% of us all facing in the same direction, perhaps we'll be ready to walk to life-sustaining places.
Oh my God. That's amazing. There was a question there about how do you have hope, but that is such a poignant way of creating hope. It is hard when we see so much destruction around us and the environment. It is really hard to be hopeful, but trusting. I hear a lot about from you. I just hear a lot of trust and belief that the earth is there, and that we can still connect with her and everything that can be offered.
Yeah, the earth isn't dying, it's us, and we're taking the species with us. The earth is powerful. The earth will regenerate, and I want the next generations to be there with that regeneration, and it is possible.
Thank you for that. We've talked about all of that, all of this, all of that.
Pretty great.
Oh, there was a great question about when that was asked by I think it was Jody Spotted Bear. Was asking about like the walking with our sisters just had such an impact. That it had traveled quite a few places, and that it was really a community motivated I don't know if it's exhibition or if it was it was very community connected and generated. And there was just a curiosity of how did you see that happening, or what were some of the conversations, or how did that become so powerful from your perspective?
Well, it was just, I can remember when the media was just starting to report on murdered and missing Indigenous women, and they were saying allegedly, 612 was the number that they were throwing out there. And they got that through NWAC's initial, Native Women's Association of Canada's initial research. And then I can remember when when they started taking out the word allegedly, and it became kind of like people really understood that this was real. And for many, many years in silence, communities were grieving the losses. And if you weren't directly impacted, you would know somebody who was. And so it's so widespread that so many people felt the grief and the impact. And then when mainstream Canada was alerted to it in a way that made them understand that it was real, then the outpouring of their compassion happened as well. And so, and that's always the goal. The goal is never to have unending conflict. The goal is to bring awareness to the point where things can change.
Yeah.
And we really do need to acknowledge that it's easy, especially, and for me, I'm talking about for myself, I can get pretty cynical about Canadians on a whole, in the sense that the education system is failing them. It seems like the same crap that I went through, my daughter has to go through, and our grandchildren will go through, and it's just like never-ending cycle of these generations of ignorance. But there are a lot of Canadians who are not like that, and who are compassionate, and who do want things to change, and who are willing to see that change. And I have to remind myself of that we're not, constantly faced with militarized police forces from all like, it's all of us, the people who feel this sense of compassion, that are going to make this change. So how did it become so powerful? I think it was partly for spiritual reasons. I think that there was it became pretty apparent from the elders in each of the communities that would say, a lot of the spirits of the women weren't resting, and that they did ceremonies to facilitate that and help that. So I think that spiritually speaking, there was mysterious things that I don't understand that were happening. Then there was this outpouring of love and compassion, and that in itself is powerful. Like if you have groups of people outpouring love and compassion, that's unstoppable. And I think that it giving people also control in their communities to do it in the way that they needed to do it, following traditional protocols of their territory, was vitally important. Mm-hmm. There was I mentioned Wilfred Pelche yesterday. He was an elder from Wikwemikong First Nation. That's the community my daughter's partly from. So he was really important in my life. And he had this story about Lester B. Pearson going to the community of Wikwemikong. So before Lester B. Pearson became prime minister, he was the MP for the region, I guess. And he was invited into the community and would go and have dinner and whatnot. Well, he was MP every once in a while, but when he became prime minister, I guess he said that he wanted to go there, but the PMO's office got involved, the prime minister's office got involved, and they, went into the community ahead of time and tried to sort of control the dinner. So he said that, normally what would happen is the people that made the best pies just made the pies, and the people that did the turkeys made the turkeys. And there's a beautiful organization that happens without words in community. And people know who people are that do the things that they do, and nobody has to control it or organize it, or, it's an organic way of living in community where people just do the best that they do, and they bring to the table their gifts. Yeah. And so he said that, but when the PMO's office got involved, they were trying to direct the turkeys and the pies and the whatnot. And so turkeys were left in ovens and people were waiting on instruction on whether they should bring them down. The wrong people were making the pies, and it turned into a big chaos. And, I always remember that story. And Wilfred was always so humorous. And I remember that story because when it came to walking with our sisters, I thought, we have to let people bring their gifts to the table and let people do what they do best, and be smart enough to step out of the way and just trust that community has this. They've got it. When you try and govern things from the top down, it doesn't work. You have to allow the power of other people to be recognized and respected, so that it can come out and bloom and be beautiful and strong. So I think about that a lot, how it's really important not to presume and not to step in on other people. Sometimes it's best just to back off and let other people shine,
Mm-hmm. And it was, just listening to you share about the ceremonies that were happening, or the unrest of the women's in the family. They were probably like, my mom actually sewed pieces and donated, and she was compelled, like they were compelled, and it creates a way to put some of that unrest into something that can be so tangible, like sharing the vamps yesterday with a little plate, and that she used to put her lips on the plate, like that was so powerful, because we never forget, right? And no matter where you are, you're always connected to home, connected to family, and that you're never forgotten. And I think that that's really what's important to remind ourselves, is that even though we're away, we could be gone for decades, but we're never forgotten. And no matter how you live, right? I think that's so powerful. Yeah,
And the families really, sometimes in some of the communities, in places that I got to attend, I didn't attend all of them, but I got to attend some of them. And in some of them, there was special ceremonies held for families, or families were given the opportunity to talk, or were part of the organizing committee. So it was really important that families had a voice there. And it was sort of solemn in a way, but it was also really moving. I remember I went to Winnipeg and I was helping to install there, and this couple came in. They were a non-native couple, and they were old. They were, quite old. I would say late 70s, at least, maybe early 80s. And they came in and wanted to see the exhibit before it was opened. And I said, you can't unless you volunteer to help. Kind of cruel that way, I guess. And I just, I should have just said, go ahead. But, in the end, it worked out okay, because they did volunteer. They sat there, they helped for about an hour and a half or something. And then after, the man came up and he held my hands and he was crying. And he said, I just didn't know. I just didn't know. And that's all he said, And so I think about also the families of one of the murdered young women from Winnipeg. They came and they walked, and they said that, they said, oh, this pair stands out more than any other pair. And the pair that they had identified was one that was made specifically for their daughter. And they didn't even know that. And then we flipped the vamp over to look at it, and it said her name and who the artist was who made it. And they just, they had a real moment. They said, I didn't think so many people cared. And that was like, there was a lot of things that happened in all the communities. None of this will ever be recorded. It had happened in a moment, in real time, and it was beautiful, and it was strong, and it was great.
incredible, powerful. Mm. I just like to give space for thought because it's so it's like so rich what you're, and I just don't want to jump into like something else to not honor and recognize those incredible moments that were able to happen and healing, that's able to happen. When you're, this was just one kind of a practical question that came in from Joan Borsa. The question was, in your big work, do you have helpers that create those big pieces with you, or do you do them by yourself?
That's a good question. I do them by myself. I really wish that I could have a very large studio that would have a whole staff, and then I would be able to like create all of the ideas that I have in my head. So I will die before all of the ideas that I have in my head stored up are exhausted. So I have like I've got at least 10 or 20 paintings sitting here in my head, just waiting. And so I wish that I did have a big support network to help, because honestly, it takes a lot to do them. Like they're faster than beadwork, but they're definitely slower than abstract expressionism, I think. Sometimes I was like, why wasn't I an abstract expressionist? That would have been awesome. I'd be able to just really work fast, but they take like a whole month from start to finish. And when I say a month, I'm talking about like getting up in the morning, making a coffee, getting painting right away, taking a few breaks here and there for like maybe having a meal or taking care of an email, and then going to bed at around 1 or 2, and then getting up and doing it again and again and again and again and again until it's all done. So this is day after day after day after day, and it's like I can't paint fast enough. So I do wish that I had like studio assistants, but that hasn't happened yet. I had one person, one of my friends helped me out a little bit with some water once, and that was good. And then Isaac has helped me a couple times, like on a few little things like leaves and things like that, but for the most part, no.
And there's one question, I think it's a good to end it on, because we have like 5 minutes left, is to talk about the camp and like what inspired it, what your fundraising always, and creating this space. And I think we could go out with just hearing about your camp and what you see it, what you see it impacting in the future and all of that.
Well, that I like ending on that too. That's a good one. So the camp, Nimki Ajabakong, like I said, was started with me and Isaac and other people like Taryn and Quinn and Mary and Linda, and there's a lot of people that have been involved. And we started it to have a space that would be moving towards observing and respecting the natural law, the rhythms of the land, and to have it also be a space where language could be taught and thrive. So it's a language camp, but then it's also a land-based learning camp, and then it's also traditional and contemporary arts place. And we say camp, but it's not really a camp because there's people that live there. So it was always meant to be a place where people could come and learn and be together and learn in a way that was beyond workshop. So in a lived environment, I guess is the best way to put it, to become masters of things. Because what we were finding was that in this area anyway, because of people's jobs and school commitments, a lot of the traditional types of activities, of land-based activities, language, traditional arts, were really relegated to weekends or after school. And that was leaving this kind of like, you could see that in the future, there wouldn't be, there'd be less and less people that would carry the knowledge about like traditional harvesting for quill baskets, for example, or the language or whatever. And so there's a conflict between the calendar and the clock and the natural rhythms of the land and the calendar of the earth and the land and the clock of the earth, I guess, the natural clock. So we wanted a space where we weren't living in conflict all the time in that sense. And it allowed people to understand how to do things and to become really good at it from start to finish, so that they could carry the knowledge on to the future generations. That's the whole point of it. And then to return back to the land and understand how to live on the land better, and to live on the land sort of to get reconnected again in that way. So we're heated by wood stoves out there. We have solar power for our power and backup generators, but hopefully that's not used too much. So that's sort of the idea of it. Really, we concentrate a lot on the language. So everything we do is sort of foundational in the language, because we've put an emphasis in it, and we've recognized that as being one of the most important things that we can do. That's not to say other people in the region aren't doing other things that are great and the same types of things, but just that was what we were thinking, is that get back to the land, learn as much as we can, and create a space where young people can come and learn and be immersed in a sense where they become the knowledge carriers of these specialized fields. So instead of being provided a kit to create a quill basket, for example, you know how to harvest the sweetgrass when it's ready, you know how to go harvest the birch when it's ready, you know how to harvest the porcupine, how to take care of it, how to do the quills from roadkill and whatnot, and you know how to do all of those steps, and then you get good at it, doing it over and over and over again. Just like hides, your first hide won't be as good as your 10th hide, that kind of thing.
Amazing. And then it's and how many cabins are you wanting to build? I've supported those fundraisings. I love that. But you have, how many cabins do you have now?
We have 6 right now, and that'll be it for a while. We're not planning on expanding or anything. That's sufficient. We have enough space for the people who live there, and we have enough space for guests who come. And then our latest studio / language learning space is beautiful, and it's going to be if COVID would just hurry up and end, then we built this place before. We started dreaming of this place and wanting it before COVID, and started building, and then COVID hit, and then now it's done. And it's we don't want it to be empty. We want tons of people and laughter and kids and all sorts of things happening in their community stuff to happen. And that's the goal for it. And the thing about fundraising is it's exhausting when you do Facebook auctions and things like that. But it's also really fulfilling. And you see that there's a lot of support from community coming from all over. And really, we couldn't have done any of what we did without everybody like yourself and the people who have contributed. That really built the place. We had the idea, but we sure didn't have those kinds of funds to do that. So it's been really amazing to see how social media can, when you crowdsource for things, how people really step up and help that to become a reality. So we've crowdsourced for other people too, and we'll continue to do that and to donate to other people's initiatives. I think it's each one, if we each help each other, we'll get stronger.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about social media, for the most part, I really valued hearing when you said that I never really got anything creatively out of social media, which just very true. It kind of just detracts you, but it has such a capacity to support and create up and help. And so, yeah, just really love that a lot. I just want to say thank you, Masicho Kuyanik Aihai, for for just this incredible time that you took to spend with me, spend with us, and for everyone that came out and engaged in the conversation and asked really good questions. And we'll keep the chat too. And Christi has copies. I have a copy. So if anything comes from that, just really thank you. Thank you very much.
And Eskimon, I'm very grateful. And thank you. And thanks everybody who organized it and everyone who tuned in today and this evening or whatever time it is, wherever you are. And I wish you all well. I wish you all good health and much joy and laughter and freedom.
Freedom. You know, we're going to close up now, but I met Wilfred's children, Greg and Jennifer.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. What a small world. Holy.
Small world. Thunder Bay, because Greg would house actors at his house. And so Jonathan Fisher and all these, like, I would do a show in Thunder Bay about every year for about 5 or 6 years. And so he always opened the door for one of the actors. And so then Greg, we would kind of hang out at their house. And I just remember the picture of Wilfred being there, and him and his daughter and his sister would just share stories about their father. So thank you for bringing his picture up and for sharing that knowledge and how alive his memory is with people who really knew and loved him.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.